and to the SupaTea podcast show. So, that's a lot going on this month of May. I do apologize. There was no episode last Sunday. Last Sunday was Mother's Day, and also that week prior to last Sunday was my birthday, and also I had my first gala of the season. And I wanted to I wanted to do three. I wanted to do three. I know that was a bit much. It's a bit much. It's a bit much. But had I done three, it is still possible, you know. I'm a dreamer. I'm a dreamer. Forgot to put my lipstick on. Had I went to a third one, it would have been today. It would have been today, and this top was gonna come up in there. This top was gonna come up in the third one. You know. Uh, anyway, anyway, anyway. It's Soulful Sundays. It's Soulful Sundays, and just a week off. I feel like the week before. I don't know. Again, May has been very busy, very very busy, very busy. I have graduations. I'm approaching the 12th week of my business cohort. I still have 6 weeks of other stuff to do, classes. But this summer, I'm free. I'm free this summer. And I saw this young lady that had on something very similar to this. But it was different. Because, see, this can detach. I don't know if hers was made like that. I also feel like the neck that turns into a hood of mine, it's like my hood, I don't know if it's my hair that's poking it up or what. I don't know. But her hood was on her head, looking a lot more flatter. But I like the print she has, and it inspired me today to put on mine. Even though had I had went to the other gala, I would have worn this to the gala. But I would have took more time to jazz it up. I literally was relaxing on my couch, watching Tamala Man. How true it is. Watching Tamala Man and her husband do their thing. What's the name of the show? Don't ask me the name of the show. It's my, I think it's like my maybe second time watching the show, and I'm watching it on YouTube, so that's why the name is not coming out right now. But without further ado, it is Soulful Sunday. I just wanted to catch everybody up on me. What's happening in my life? It's a lot. It's a lot of good stuff. A whole lot of good stuff. Kudos to Michael Beckwith for being the amazing leader that he is, because I needed all of those reminders that I've been getting these last few weeks. Because, the capacity. All I can say is the capacity. When you are shifting, and I'm speaking for myself, so I should just say when I am shifting from one chapter to a next chapter, and I've known that I've been shifting to this next chapter. I just didn't know all of what this next chapter was bringing, because it's bringing a lot. And so I've definitely been prepared to hold all of this, what this next chapter in my life is bringing. However, just human nature, our wonderful egos, and people, when they hear ego, they feel like, ooh, that's a bad thing. However, the ego is a part of us that also is protective of us. And I literally, when I say literally, like 10 minutes ago, had a moment. And I want to share this because, cataloging, hello, my growth and my evolution. And yeah, just literally like 10 minutes ago had an issue with my ego where I, again, was comfortable on the couch. Not to TMI you, but, when I say comfortable, I mean comfortable, like comfortable. Like, no jammies. No jammies at all. I was just there, you know? So now I'm like, I can't come on camera like that, you know? And even though this has this wonderful feature where I could go like this and I could just talk, right? Um, I wanted to see I mean, I can't see y'all. I wanted my audience to see me. I was like, all right, what can I quickly put on in 5 minutes? And this was it, you know? And then my brain was just like, okay, but was that really what you want to put on? Is that really what you want to put on? That was my ego trying to be protective. And I was like, yes. Like, this is what I was going to wear. Anywho, yes, I'm going to wear it. I'm going to wear it for my show. Life, people. Life. So we are still inside. We're going to be in this book for a while. Dr. Joe Dispenza's Evolve Your Brain. And we left off, it looks like, on page 42. And I want to say that we got up to coincidence number 2, because that just makes sense to me. I don't edit this. This is live. So I go live, I do my show, and whew, excuse me. I'll be right back. Whew. All right, have to get some water. Have to get some water. Oh, 3 people in. Welcome. Whew. All right. So again, we are going back into Joe Dispenza. Probably saying his name wrong. Evolve Your Brain. Yes. We're on page 42, and if you have missed up to this part, you can see all of the posted posts that we have already posted. I'm going to just jump right in. Coincidence number 2. The thoughts are real. Thoughts directly affect the body. The way we think affects our body as well as our life. You may have heard this concept expressed before in various ways. For example, in that phrase, mind over matter, the people I interviewed not only shared this belief, but also used it as a basis for making conscious changes in their own mind, body, and personal life. To understand how they accomplish this, I began to study the growing body of research on the relationship between thought and the physical body. There is an emerging field of science, called psychoneuroimmunology that has demonstrated the connection rather between the mind and the body. I can describe what I learned in these simplistic terms. Your every thought produces a biochemical reaction in the brain. The brain then releases chemical signals that are transmitted to the body, where they act as messengers of thought. The thoughts that produce the chemicals in the brain allows your body to feel exactly the way you were just thinking. So every thought produces a chemical that is matched by a feeling in your body. Essentially, when you think happy, inspiring, or positive thoughts, your brain manufactures chemicals that make you feel joyful, inspired, or uplifted. For example, when you anticipate an experience that is pleasurable, the brain immediately makes a chemical neurotransmitter called dopamine, which turns the brain and body on in anticipation for that experience and causes you to begin to feel excited. If you have hateful, angry, or self-depreciating thoughts, the brain also produces chemicals called neuropeptides that the body responds to in a comparable way. You feel angry or unworthy, you see, your thoughts immediately do become matter. When the body responds to a thought by having a feeling, this initiates a response in the brain. The brain, which constantly monitors and evaluates the status of the body, notices that the body is feeling a certain way. In response to that bodily feeling, the brain generates thoughts that produce corresponding chemical messages. You begin to think the way you are feeling. Thinking creates feeling, and then feeling creates thinking in a continuous cycle. This loop eventually creates a particular state in the body that determines the general nature of how we feel and behave. We can call this state of being, for example, suppose a person lives much of her life in a repeating cycle of thoughts and feelings related to insecurity. The moment she has a thought about not being good enough or smart enough or enough of anything, her brain releases chemicals that produces a feeling of insecurity. Now she is feeling the way she was once thinking. Once she is feeling insecure, she then will begin to think the way she was just feeling. In other words, her body is now causing her to think. This thought leads to more feelings of insecurity. And so, okay, 1 second. My bad. Okay. 1 second. 1 second, guys. I don't know what the heck is going on with my camera holder here. But gravity was like pulling on it. All right, we better. Let's start here. The moment she has a thought about not being good enough or smart enough or enough of anything, her brain releases chemicals that produces a feeling of insecurity. Now she is feeling the way she was thinking. Once she is feeling insecure, she then will begin to think the way she was just feeling. In other words, her body is now causing her to think. This thought leads to more feelings of insecurity, and so the cycle perpetuates itself. If this person's thoughts and feelings continue year after year to generate the same biological feedback loop, because her brain and her body, she will exist in a state of being that is called insecure. The more we think the same thoughts, which then produce the same chemicals, which cause the body to have the same feelings, the more we physically become modified by our thoughts. In this way, depending on what we are thinking and feeling, we create our state of being. Let's say it again. The more we think the same thoughts, which then produce the same chemicals, which causes the body to have the same feelings, the more we physically become modified by our thoughts. In this way, depending on what we are thinking and feeling, we create our state of being. What we think about and the energy or intensity of these thoughts directly influence our health, the choices we make, and ultimately the quality of our lives. Applying this reasoning to our own lives, many interviewees understood that many of their thoughts not only did not serve their health, but also might be the reason their unhappy or unhealthful conditions developed in the first place. Many of them have spent nearly every day for decades in the internal state of anxiety, worry, sadness, jealousy, anger, or some other form of emotional pain. Thinking and feeling and thinking like that for so long, they said, is what have manifested their conditions. From this, they reason that to transform their physical health, they had to address their attitudes, groups of thoughts that were clustered in habitual sequences. One's attitude create a state of being that is directly connected to the body. Thus, a person who wants to improve his health has to change entire patterns in how they think. And these new thought patterns or attitudes will eventually change their state of being. To do this, they must break free of perpetual loops of detrimental thinking and feeling and thinking, and replace them with new, beneficial ones. Here's an example. Developing one digestive ailment after another and living with constant pain in his spine finally prompted Tom to examine his life. Upon self-reflection, he realized that he had been suppressing feelings of desperation caused by the stress of staying in a job that made him miserable. He had spent 2 decades being angry and frustrated with his employer, co-workers, and family. Other people often experience Tom's short temper, but for all that time, his secret thoughts had revolved around self-pity and victimization rather. Repeatedly experiencing these rigid patterns of thinking, believing, feeling, and living amounted to toxic attitudes that Tom's body just couldn't stomach. His healing began. Tom told me when he recognized that his unconscious attitudes were the basis for his state of being, for the person he had become, most of those whose case histories I studied reached conclusions similar to Tom's. To begin changing their attitudes, these people begin to pay constant attention to their thoughts. In particular, they made a conscious effort to observe their automatic thought processes, even the harmful ones. To their surprise, they found that most of their persistent negative inner statements were not true. In other words, Just because we have a thought does not necessarily mean we have to believe it's true. As a matter of fact, most thoughts are ideas that we make up and then come to believe. Believing merely becomes a habit. For example, Sheila, with all her digestive disorders, noticed how often she thought of herself as a victim without the capacity to change her life. She saw that these thoughts had triggered feelings of helplessness. Questioning this belief enabled her to believe, rather, enabled her to admit that her hardworking mother had done nothing to prevent or dissuade Sheila from going after her dreams. Some of my subjects liken their repetitive thoughts to computer programs running all day, every day in the background of their lives. Since these people were the ones operating these programs, they could elect to change or even delete them. This was a crucial insight. At some point, all those I interviewed had to fight against the notion that one's thoughts are uncontrollable. Instead, they had to choose to be free and take control of their thinking. Everyone had resolved to interrupt habitual negative thought processes before they could produce painful chemical reactions in their body. These individuals were determined to manage their thoughts and eliminate ways of thinking that did not serve them. Conscious thoughts, repeated often enough, become unconscious thinking. And a common example of this, we must consciously think about our every action while we're learning to drive. After much practice, we can drive 100 miles from point A to point B and not remember any part of the trip because our subconscious mind is typically at the wheel. We've all experienced being in an unaware state during a routine drive, only to feel our conscious mind re-engaging in response to an unusual engine sound or the rhythmic thump of a flat tire. So if we continually entertain the same thoughts, they'll start off as conscious ones, but they'll ultimately become unconscious, automatic thought programs. There is a sound explanation in neuroscience of how this happens. You'll understand how this happens from a scientific standpoint by the time we finish reading this book. These unconscious ways of thinking become our unconscious ways of being, and they directly affect our lives just as conscious thoughts do. Just as all thoughts set off biochemical reactions that lead to behavior, our repetitive unconscious thoughts produce automatic acquired patterns of behavior that are almost involuntary. These behavioral patterns are habits, and most surely they become neurologically hardwired in the brain. It takes awareness and effort to break the cycle of a thinking process that has become unconscious. First, we need to step out of our routine so we can look at our lives. Through contemplation and self-reflection, we can become aware of our unconscious scripts. Then, we must observe these thoughts without responding to them so that they no longer initiate the automatic chemical responses that produce habitual behavior. Within all of us, we possess a level of self-awareness which can observe our thinking. We must learn how to separate from these programs, and when we do, we can willfully have dominion over them. Ultimately, we can exercise control over our thoughts. In doing so, we are neurologically breaking apart thoughts that have been hardwired in our brain. Since we know from neuroscience that thoughts produce chemical reactions in the brain, it would make sense then that our thoughts would have some effect on our physical body by changing our internal state. Not only do our thoughts matter in how we live our life, but our thoughts become matter right within our own body. Thoughts matter. I'm going to take a pause right here and drink some water. So, it's very important to be aware of the thoughts that you're having and whatever you want to change in your life, whatever, whether it's something physical, whether it's something financial, whatever it is you want to change in your life, it starts with your thought process around it. And this is why meditation is important. And I can speak from my experience. My brain is constantly going. And so sitting down and quieting it is very, very, very important. And I have been learning, and I know this now, especially just from experience, and also just taking taking the time to just spend and just quiet one's mind. And there's all forms of meditation. It's quieting your mind. It's also having inspired meditations, like listening to a meditation, guided meditations. Joe Dispenza is very good. He has a bunch of guided meditations, and other people too. Other people too have a bunch of guided meditations. You can even at this point create your own guided meditation just by recording it and publishing it. And you can publish it here on this platform, YouTube. You keep it private. You can publish it for other people to listen to and benefit off of. It's a lot. There's a lot that you can do. But the point is that however you want your life to be, you have the ability to make it so. And even without having a huge network and family and da 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 da, yes, it is important to have those things. But if you don't have those things, it doesn't mean that it's impossible for you to create the life that you want. You may have, it starts with yourself. It starts within you. Like, you have to know that you're more than flesh and blood. You have to know that you have the ability to create whatever it is that you want to have and experience in life. And this book is just diving deep into how and why, and people who had experiences that, you know, professionals was like, oh no, you're not going to ever get out of that experience, but they did. They did. And so many people have and are. And we're at a time, I know it's a lot going on. I don't know where you are located on the planet. It's a lot going on all over the planet. Because a lot of people are waking up. And the people who that were profiting off of people not being aware, not having knowledge, those people, they don't realize that they have to adapt and not profit off of controlling others, but that they can still have profits. They can still earn profits. They don't have to go into poverty because people are stepping within their own power and their own authority over themselves and healing and growing and learning. They don't, you know, it's so much. So I encourage people who come to my channel to do your own research, to go within yourself, to spend time with yourself, to go into nature, spend time out in nature, and to be clear about what it is you want to have, and be grateful for what you do have as well. And know, like, I can speak for myself as I'm healing from injuries. I don't know how long it's going to take, you know, but it's not a quick thing, you know. This brother here, Joe Dispenza, he had broke parts in his back and he healed himself. However, he started his healing immediately. And there were other factors. He was athletic before that injury. So, his healing process maybe took a few years, whereas they wanted to put rods in his spine, and he refused those rods in his spine. And so, for me, my injuries were different. My athletic abilities were different before my injuries. So my healing process is a while, and it don't feel great all the time, the process of it. But being consistent, and I can only speak from my own experience, being consistent, I've been in physical therapy consistently since November of last year, 2025. And, bit by bit, I'm able to do small things that were excruciating painfully for me to do. So I give thanks. I give thanks to having the tools. I give thanks for the opportunity to be able to share and catalog my experience and my growth, and also my evolution, and also to share this with you all. So let's get back into the book. All right. So if we continually entertain the same thoughts, they'll start off as conscious ones, but they'll ultimately become unconscious, automatic thought programs. There is a sound explanation in neuroscience for how this happens. You'll understand how this happens from a scientific standpoint by the time we get to the end of the book. These unconscious ways of thinking become our unconscious ways of being, and they directly affect our lives, just as conscious thoughts do. Just as all thoughts set off biochemical reactions that lead to behavior, our repetitive, unconscious thoughts produce automatic, acquired patterns of behavior that are almost involuntary. These behavioral patterns are habits, and most surely they become neurologically hardwired in the brain. It takes awareness and effort to break the cycle of a thinking process that has become unconscious. First, we need to step out of our routine so we can look at our lives. Through contemplation and self-reflection, we can become aware of our unconscious scripts. Then, we must observe these thoughts without responding to them, so they no longer initiate the automatic chemical responses that produce habitual behavior. Within all of us, we possess a level of self-awareness which can observe our thinking. We must learn how to separate from these programs, and when we do, we can willfully have dominion over them. Ultimately, we can exercise control over our thoughts. In doing so, we are neurologically breaking apart thoughts that have become hardwired in our brains. Since we know from neuroscience that thoughts produce chemical reactions in the brain, it would make sense then that our thoughts would have some effect on our physical body by changing our internal state. Not only do our thoughts matter in how we live out our life, but our thoughts become matter right within our own body. Thoughts matter. Out of their belief that thoughts are real and that the way people think directly impacts their health and their lives, these individuals saw that their own thinking processes were what had gotten them into trouble. They began to examine their life analytically. When they became inspired and diligent about changing their thinking, they were able to revitalize their health. A new attitude can become a new habit. Coincidence number 3. we can reinvent ourselves. Motivated as they were by serious illnesses, both physical and mental, the people I interviewed realized that in thinking new thoughts, they had to go all the way. To become a changed person, they would have to rethink themselves into a new life. All of those who restored their health to normal did so after making a conscious decision to reinvent themselves. Breaking away from daily routines, they spent time alone, thinking and contemplating, examining and speculating about what kind of people they wanted to become. They asked questions that challenged their most deeply held assumptions about who they were. What if questions were vital to the process? What if I stopped being an unhappy, self centered, suffering person? How can I change? What if I no longer worry or feel guilty or hold grudges? What if I begin to tell the truth to myself and to others? Those what ifs led them to other questions. Which people do I know who are usually happy, and how do they behave? Which historical figures do I admire as noble and unique? How can I be like them? What would I have to say, do, think, and act like in order to present myself differently to the world? What do I want to change about myself? Gathering information was another important step on the path to reinventation. Those I interviewed had to take what they knew about themselves and then reformat their thinking to develop new ideas of who they wanted to be. Everyone started with ideas from their own life experiences. They also delved into books and movies about people they respected, piecing together some of the merits and viewpoints of these figures, along with other qualities they were contemplating. They used all this as raw material to start building a new representation of how they wanted to express themselves. As these individuals explored possibilities for a better way of being, they also learned new modes of thinking. They interrupted the flow of repetitive thoughts that had occupied most of their waking moments, letting go of these familiar, comfortable habits of thought. They assembled a more evolved concept of whom they could become, replacing an idea of themselves with a new, greater ideal. They took time daily to mentally rehearse what this new person would be like. As discussed in Chapter 1, mental rehearsal stimulates the brain to grow new neural circuits and change the way the brain and mind work. In 1995, the Journal of Neurophysiology, an article was published demonstrating the effects that mental rehearsal alone had on developing neural networks in the brain. Neural networks are individual clusters of neurons, or neurocells, that work together and independently in a functioning brain. Neural nets, as we will affectionately call them, are the latest model in neuroscience to explain how we learn and how we remember. They can also be used to explain how the brain changes with each new experience, how different types of memories are formed, how skills develop, how conscious and unconscious actions and behaviors are demonstrated, and even how all forms of sensory information are processed. Neural networks are the current understanding in neuroscience that explains how we change on a cellular level. In this particular research, 4 groups of individuals were asked to participate in a 5-day study that involved practicing the piano in order to measure the changes that might take place in the brain. The first group of volunteers learned and memorized a specific one-handed five-finger sequence that they physically practiced every day for 2 hours during the 5-day period. The second group of individuals was asked to play the piano without any instruction or knowledge of any specific sequence. They played randomly for 2 hours every day for 5 days without learning any sequence of notes. The third group of people never ever touched the piano. They were given the opportunity to observe what was taught to the first group until they knew it by memory in their minds. Then they mentally rehearsed these exercises by imagining themselves in the experience for the same length of time per day as the participants of the first group. The fourth group was a control group. They did nothing at all. They never learned to practice anything in this particular experiment. They never even showed up. At the end of the 5-day study, the experimenters used a technique called transcranial magnetic stimulation along with a few other sophisticated gadgets in order to measure any changes that took place in the brain. To their surprise, the group that only rehearsed mentally showed almost the same changes involving expansion and development of neural networks in the same specific areas of their brain as the participants who physically practiced the sequences on the piano. The second group, which learned no piano sequences at all, showed very little change in their brain, since they did not play the same series of exercises over and over each day. The randomness of their activity never stimulated the same neural circuits on a repetitive basis, and thus did not strengthen any additional nerve cell connections. The control group, the ones who never showed up, evidenced no change at all. How did the third group produce the same brain changes as the first group without ever touching the keyboard? Through mental focusing, the third group of participants repeatedly fired specific neural networks in particular areas of their brain. As a result, they wired those nerve cells together in greater measure. Nerve cells, the concept in neuroscience is called Hebbian learning. The idea is simple. Nerve cells that fire together wire together. Therefore, when gangs of neurons are repeatedly stimulated, they will build stronger, more enriched connections between each other. According to the functional brain scans in this particular experiment, the subjects that were mentally rehearsing were activating their brain in the same way as if they were actually performing the endeavor. The repetitive firing of the neurons shaped and developed a cluster of neurons in a specific part of the brain, which now support the pattern of conscious intent. At will, their thoughts became mapped and plotted in the brain. Interestingly, the circuits strengthened and developed in the absolute same area of the brain as the group that physically practiced. They grew and changed their brain just by thinking. With the proper mental effort, the brain does not know the difference between mental or physical effort. Sheila's experience of curing her digestive illness illustrates this process of reinvention. Sheila had resolved that she would no longer revisit memories of her past and the associated attitudes that had defined her as a victim. Having identified the habitual thought processes she wanted to release, she cultivated a level of awareness where she had enough control to interrupt her unconscious thoughts. She therefore no longer fired the same associated neural networks on a daily basis. Once Sheila gained dominion over those old thought patterns and no longer fired those neurological habits of thinking, her brain began pruning away those unused circuits. This is another related aspect of Hebbian learning. that we can sum up as follows: nerve cells that no longer fire together, no longer wire together. This is the universal law of use it or lose it in action. Ooh. And it can work wonders in changing old paradigms of thoughts about ourselves. Over time, Sheila shed the burden of old limited thoughts that have been coloring her life. Go ahead, Sheila. Now it became easier for Sheila to imagine the person she wanted to be. She explored possibilities that she had never considered before. For weeks on end, she focused on how she would think and act as this new, unknown person. She constantly reviewed these new ideas about herself so that she could remember who she was going to be that day. Eventually, she turned herself into a person who was healthy, happy, and enthusiastic about her future. She got new brain circuits, just like the piano players have done. It's interesting to note here that most people I interview never felt like they had to discipline themselves to do this. Instead, they loved mentally practicing who they wanted to become. Like Sheila, all the people who shared their case histories with me succeeded in reinventing themselves. They persisted in attending to their new ideal until it became their familiar way of being. They became someone else, and that new person had new habits. They broke the habit of being their old selves. How they accomplished this brings us to the fourth credo shared by those who experience physical healing. I am excited. We're going to stop here at coincidence number 4, page 51. And yeah, I'm going to bring up briefly Michael Beckwith. I encourage you to look him up and listen to his teachings. He's definitely mentioned Dr. Joel Dispenza as an ally because even though Michael Beckwith is, I guess, considered to be a spiritual leader and spiritual teacher, as Joel Dispenza is pointing out, as a neuroscientist, with the research to back it up, that it all intertwines together. It all intertwines together. There is scientific proof to back up the advanced spiritual teachings. And it all boils down to each of us, me, you, each of us, being able to create our lives exactly how we want them to be. Create ourselves exactly how we want to be. It starts with our thoughts. It is all interconnected together. And what we think is very important. So we can't stay focused on atrocities and expect our lives not to reflect atrocities within them. We have to purposefully focus on solutions. And I can speak from my personal life that one solution that I am focused on now is healing from these injuries. I could not just allow other individuals to say, oh, well, you should just, cut off the top of your bone and, put something artificial in there and, you'll feel better then. With no guarantee, but it's possible. Like, huh? Back it up. It's like those commercials that be like, okay, if you take this medicine, it will relieve this one symptom that you're having. But please be advised, there is about 10 things, even possible death, that you may incur from taking this medicine. Please tell your doctor if you have experienced any of these things. Like, huh? No. No, thank you. No, thank you. No, thank you. We have these amazing minds in order to do some amazing things, people. And if we want to see things be better, It starts with us. It starts with us. The way the world is right now on a whole, and there's plenty of good, beautiful things happening. Please don't get discouraged by the news and what they are reporting. There are plenty, when I tell you plenty, plenty beautiful things that are happening all over the planet. Okay? And it's happening because those individuals are making those choices. Those individuals are making those decisions. Those individuals, peace, are working together to make these wonderful things happen. So you absolutely can have those experiences or similar experiences or even better experiences in your own personal life. But it starts with your thoughts. It starts with what you are feeding yourself mentally, as also physically and also spiritually on a daily basis. We are so much more than flesh and blood. I am from my good mother. We are so much more than flesh and blood. We are mental and also spiritual beings as well as physical beings. So we have to care for all three aspects of ourselves on a daily basis. We have to care for our minds on a daily basis. What are we watching? What are we intaking into our minds on a daily basis? What are we scrolling on? And here's another thing. I am not against social media, but I do believe in unplugging from the internet, period. Like turning the phone off, putting it down somewhere, and just being. You can find something to do. It could be reading a book. It could be painting. It could be listening to some music and dancing. It could be singing. It could be so many things that you decide to do with your time. However, when you are on these social media platforms, what are you watching? Because you control your algorithm. So if there's something that comes through your algorithm that you don't want to see, guess what you got to do? Guess how easy it is? You just press the X. Boop. Boop. And guess what? It is programmed to consume some of your time, but you have the ability and the choice with how much of your time you're going to give to the social media. But you program your algorithm by what you like, by the conversations that you engage in, by the posts that you comment on and that you engage in. You don't have to engage in with everything and everybody. You can control that. So my timeline is filled with positivity. Filled. Now every little now and then they filter in a little garbage, and I'll be like X, X. X. So it's positive affirmations. It is humor, because I like to laugh. And that's what's on my timeline. But again, that's just me and my personal experience. What is your experience? Are you loving what's going on in your life right now? Because if anything short of you loving what's happening in your life right now, you loving yourself, you loving and taking care of, and guess what? Let me tell you, even when you are loving everything that's happening in your life, you still have to take care of your physical, you still have to take care of your mental, you still have to take care of your spiritual. You know, it's not like, oh, everything is great now, so now I neglect those things. And it's just like your body will show when you are being neglectful to it, and you're not drinking enough water, where you're not getting enough vitamins, sunlight, fresh air, your body will reflect it. Same way your body will reflect if you're not taking care of those other aspects too. You're not taking care of your mental. If you're just watching anything and just listening to anything, it's going to reflect in your thoughts. If you're not taking care of your spirituality, it's going to reflect in your life. So be sure to take care of you, all three. You want to see, don't get so caught up with what's going on out there. Don't get so caught up unless you are working to fix it, and you cannot fix anything if you yourself are not feeling happy and whole within yourself. If there are things for you to fix within yourself, how you gonna fix something outside of yourself? How? That's like asking something broke to fix something. Or like the great Maya Angelou say, she does not trust people without a shirt that offer her a shirt. How you offering me a shirt and you don't got a shirt on yourself? How you gonna fix something out there when you got stuff to fix within yourself? So it has to be simultaneously. If you are working towards solutions outside of yourself, you better for sure be good within yourself. Because everything that you do is going to be a reflection of who you are and where you are. And people, we're all connected to divinity. We all have divinity within us. So be mindful of that. Know that fact. And thank you so much for tuning in to Soulful Sundays here at the SupaTea podcast show. It is my honor and my pleasure to be of service and to share these insights in these books that I have read, and I get to read again and reinforce and remind myself of these facts and apply and evolve and catalog my growth and evolution and share and encourage you to evolve and to grow. Again, thank you so much for tuning in to the Super Tea Podcast Show. See you this time next week, Sunday. Every Sunday, we're here at 3 p.m. Now, Mother's Day, don't expect me to be on here. That's a Sunday that I will not be here. But every other Sunday, I will be here. Thank you again, and have a great one.